The last Christmas gift my mother ever expected me to keep was the one that exposed exactly what I meant to my family. She smiled as she handed my younger stepbrother the keys to a brand new pickup truck. The room erupted in applause. My stepfather wrapped him in a hug. Everyone took pictures. Then my mother turned to me and slid a thin white envelope across the table. "You're practical, Emma," she said with a laugh. "You'll appreciate this more." The room chuckled before I'd even opened it. Inside was a faded grocery store gift card. The store had closed almost 2 years earlier. Behind it was a folded note in my stepfather's handwriting. "Maybe next Christmas will finally be your lucky one." Even my stepbrother Mason laughed hard enough to wipe tears from his eyes. I looked around the table. Nobody looked uncomfortable. Nobody thought it had gone too far. To them, it was just another harmless family joke. So I smiled, folded the note, slipped it into my purse, finished dinner, and drove home without saying a single word. 24 days later, those same people would be calling me nonstop after learning I had become the new owner of the company where my stepfather and Mason had worked for years. By then, the joke wasn't funny anymore. My name is Emma Brooks. I'm 35 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that if you worked hard enough, eventually people would notice. Instead, they simply expected more from you. If you've ever been the daughter everyone relied on but nobody celebrated, you'll understand why I kept that little note. It wasn't because it hurt. It was because it finally proved something I'd spent years trying to deny. I had never been forgotten. I'd simply been valued less. My father died when I was 13. For a while, it was just my mother and me. Then Richard came into our lives. He wasn't cruel, at least not in ways other people could see. He simply loved his own son, Mason, a little louder than he ever loved me. At first, the differences seemed small. Mason got new bikes. I inherited secondhand ones. He got birthday parties with all his friends. Mine were quiet dinners at home. When money was tight, there was always enough for his school trips. Mine somehow became too expensive. The older I got, the less anyone tried to hide it. I became the dependable daughter, the one who didn't complain, the one who figured things out alone. Families have a strange habit. Once they decide you're strong enough to survive without help, they stop offering it altogether. I left home the week after high school graduation, worked mornings in a cafe, studied business at night, took every internship I could find. There were weeks when I survived on instant noodles just to pay tuition. I never asked my family for $1, not because I didn't need it, because I already knew the answer. Years later, I built a quiet, comfortable life. Nothing extravagant. A small townhouse, an aging sedan, a career I was proud of. Everything I owned had been earned one long day at a time. I told myself that was enough. Most days, I believed it. Even after everything, I still accepted my mother's Christmas invitations. Hope is stubborn. No matter how many times it's disappointed, it keeps whispering, "Maybe this year will be different." As I pulled into their driveway that evening, Mason's shiny new truck was parked out front. Neighbors were already admiring it. Inside, expensive presents filled the space beneath the tree. Most had Mason's name on them. Mine sat by itself. A single white envelope. Thin enough that I could already tell there wasn't much inside. For some reason, the moment I saw it, I knew exactly how the evening was going to end. I just didn't know that the greatest opportunity of my life was already waiting for me, just 3 days away. I drove home that night with the radio turned off. The white envelope sat on the passenger seat the entire drive. Every red light gave me another chance to throw it away. I never did. When I got home, I placed it on my kitchen counter beside my keys. Not because the gift mattered, because the message did. For years, I'd convinced myself I was imagining the difference between Mason and me, that maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe Richard wasn't playing favorites. Maybe Mom was just trying to keep the peace. But an expired gift card and a sarcastic note don't happen by accident. Someone has to choose them. Someone has to think they're funny. That little envelope wasn't carelessness. It was honesty. For the first time in my life, I stopped making excuses for people who had never made any for me. Looking back now, I can see exactly when I became the daughter nobody worried about. I was 16 when I got my first job at a neighborhood coffee shop. Not because I wanted spending money, because I wanted school supplies without asking my mother. When college applications came around, I earned scholarships and worked evenings to cover everything else. My family called me independent. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Years later, I realized it was permission. Permission to stop helping me. Permission to stop noticing me. Whenever Mason struggled financially, someone rescued him. When his car broke down, Richard bought another. When he dropped out of college, it wasn't his fault. When he quit another job, everyone said he just hadn't found his passion yet. Meanwhile, every achievement of mine was treated like something expected. No celebration, no congratulations. Just, well, Emma always figures things out. After college, I joined an investment consulting firm as a junior analyst. I wasn't the smartest person in the building. I wasn't the loudest either. I simply showed up every day, finished my work, helped whoever needed it, stayed late when deadlines demanded it. Eventually, people stopped asking if I could handle difficult projects. They simply handed them to me. I liked it that way. Recognition never interested me. Respect did. 3 days after Christmas, I was halfway through reviewing a client's financial report when my phone rang. The caller ID displayed the executive floor. That never happened. I answered immediately. Emma? It was my department director. Can you come upstairs? Right now. His voice wasn't worried. It was unusually formal. I'll be there in a minute. When the elevator doors opened, his assistant was already waiting. This way. Instead of taking me to the usual conference room, she led me to the executive boardroom, the largest meeting room in the entire building. The doors were already open. Inside sat 3 board members, our company attorney, and the founder himself, Arthur Collins, the man most employees only saw once a year. He looked up as I walked in, smiled warmly, and said something that completely caught me off guard. Emma? I've been hoping we'd finally have this conversation. I had no idea that the next hour was about to change my life forever. I stood there for a moment, wondering if I'd somehow walked into the wrong room. The company's founder, Arthur Collins, motioned toward the empty chair across from him. Please, Emma, have a seat. I did. No one smiled. No one looked nervous either. It felt important. Arthur folded his hands and looked directly at me. Do you know why you're here? I shook my head. I honestly have no idea. He nodded, almost as if that was the answer he expected. Good. That means you haven't been trying to impress anyone. I frowned. I'm sorry? A small smile crossed his face. For the last 4 years, I've been quietly watching the people who might someday lead this company. The room became completely silent. I wasn't looking for the loudest manager. I wasn't looking for the person who closed the biggest deals. I was looking for someone people trusted. Someone who solved problems without asking for recognition. Someone who made difficult decisions even when nobody was watching. Then he leaned forward. Emma? Every report kept bringing me back to the same person. I stared at him. He slid a thick folder across the table. My name was printed on the front. Inside were years of performance reviews, letters from department heads, client feedback, even handwritten notes from employees I'd helped train years earlier. I had no idea any of it existed. Arthur waited while I turned the pages. You've spent years making other people successful. You've protected clients. You've protected employees. You've protected this company. He smiled gently. Now it's time for someone to protect you. The company's attorney opened another folder. This is a confidential succession agreement. I looked from one face to another. I'm not following, Arthur chuckled. I suppose I skipped the important part. He took a slow breath. I'm retiring. The words hung in the room. I don't have children. I've spent 2 years deciding who should continue what I've spent 40 years building. He looked me straight in the eye. I've chosen you. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Surely there had been a mistake. There were vice presidents with decades more experience. Senior executives who had been there twice as long as I had. Why me? I finally whispered. Arthur didn't hesitate. Because character is harder to find than experience. I can teach someone how to run a business. I can't teach them integrity. The attorney began explaining the transition. Arthur had created an employee succession program years earlier. Instead of selling the company to a giant corporation, ownership would gradually transfer through a structured agreement. The board had already approved the plan. If I accepted, I would become the next chief executive officer. And over the coming months, the majority owner of the company. The entire process would remain confidential until every legal document was complete. No announcements, no social media, no celebrating. Until then, nobody could know. Not coworkers, not friends, and especially not family. I signed the confidentiality agreement with a hand that felt strangely calm. Walking back to my office, nothing around me looked different. People were laughing near the elevators. Someone complained about the coffee machine. Phones rang. Meetings continued. The world carried on exactly as it had that morning. Only, mine had completely changed. That evening, I drove home in the same old sedan. Stopped at the same grocery store. Cooked the same simple dinner. No one looking through my apartment window would have guessed that, within weeks, I would be leading one of the largest companies in the region. Meanwhile, across town, Richard and Mason were probably still laughing about the expired gift card they'd given me for Christmas. Neither of them had the slightest idea that before the new year arrived, the overlooked daughter they had spent years underestimating would become the person signing every paycheck in the company where they both worked. For the next 6 weeks, I lived 2 completely different lives. During the day, I sat in board meetings with Arthur Collins, learning everything there was to know about running a company with more than 800 employees. He walked me through contracts, acquisitions, leadership decisions, and one lesson he repeated almost every day: never confuse kindness with weakness. You can care about people and still hold them accountable. Those words stayed with me because they reminded me of someone I'd spent years trying to please. My family. Outside the office, nothing changed. I still drove my 10-year-old sedan, still lived in my small townhouse, still made coffee at home instead of buying it every morning. The money hadn't changed me, because technically, none of it was mine yet. The legal transition wasn't complete. Until the announcement, I was just another employee, exactly the way Arthur wanted it. Then came Monday morning. At precisely 9 o'clock, every employee received the same email. Arthur Collins announces retirement. Board appoints Emma Brooks as new Chief Executive Officer. For a moment, the entire office went silent. Then applause erupted across the floor. People started coming to my office one after another. Some congratulated me. Others simply smiled and said, they picked the right person. I thanked every one of them, because I knew titles didn't earn respect. People did. Just before lunch, the head of human resources knocked on my door. She carried a thick stack of personnel files. These are the departments Arthur wanted reviewed first. I looked at the labels. Regional branches, management performance, operational concerns. One folder immediately caught my attention. The branch where Richard had worked for nearly 20 years. The same branch where Mason had been promoted into management. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for facts. Hours passed as I read every report, attendance records, customer complaints, internal audits, performance evaluations. By the end of the afternoon, the picture was impossible to ignore. Richard had ignored company policies for years. Several warnings had been quietly overlooked. Mason wasn't much better. Missed deadlines, poor leadership scores, repeated complaints from employees reporting directly to him. The previous regional manager had protected both of them because of personal friendships. It never should have happened. I closed the folders and leaned back in my chair. This was my first real test as CEO. Not because they were family, because they weren't strangers. If I made exceptions, everything Arthur had built would slowly become exactly what he never wanted. A company where relationships mattered more than merit. I picked up my pen, signed the restructuring recommendations. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, simply because every employee deserved the same standard, including my own family. I had a feeling. They were about to learn that the quiet daughter they'd underestimated for years wasn't just their relative anymore. She was now the person responsible for protecting the future of the company. And I already knew my phone would start ringing the moment they found out why their office had suddenly come under review. The calls started before dinner. My mother, Richard, Mason, then cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, one after another. I let every call go to voicemail. The next morning, my mother finally reached me. "Emma, sweetheart," she said, her voice suddenly warm. "We're so proud of you. We should celebrate as a family." Family. It had been a long time since she'd used that word for me. A week later, I agreed to one dinner. Not to celebrate, to say goodbye to the version of me that had spent years begging to be enough. As soon as I walked in, everyone smiled. Richard shook my hand. Mason offered me the best seat at the table. My mother hugged me tighter than she had in years. Halfway through dinner, I reached into my purse and placed the old white envelope in the center of the table. "The last Christmas gift you gave me," I said quietly. The room fell silent. "You gave me this before you knew I'd become CEO." I looked at each of them. That makes it the most honest gift I ever received. No one spoke. I won't fire anyone because you're family, and I won't protect anyone because you're family. From today forward, everyone earns their place. I stood, picked up my coat, and smiled. For years, I thought success would make you value me. It didn't. It simply revealed who already did. Then I walked out. For the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving as the overlooked daughter. I was leaving as a woman who finally understood that her worth had never depended on anyone's approval but her own.